Thomas Edison, Richard Branson, John F. Kennedy, Mozart, Michael Jordan, Will Smith. That sounds like a list of highly successful titans in a variety of vocations. Why is it that we rarely hear that they have or had ADHD? And you know what we hear even less about? Serena Williams, Emma Watson, Mel Robbins, Whoopi Goldberg, Agatha Christie, Erin Brockovich, Cher. Yeah, the successful women navigating ADHD. And that's exactly why I started this podcast, ADHD for Smartass Women. I'm your host, Tracy Otsuka. I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, a lifelong student, now a coach. I'm also the creator of Your ADHD Brain is A-OK, a system that helps people like you figure out what they should do with their life. And we're here today to talk ADHD, your strengths, your symptoms, your workarounds, and how you proudly stand out instead of trying to fit in. I credit my ADHD for some of my greatest gifts. And you know what? I spy a happier life for you too. So without further ado, a shiny new episode is starting now. Hello, I am your host, Tracy Otsuka. Thank you so much for joining me here. I hope you will subscribe to this podcast and our newsletter over at tracyotsuka.com. You are listening to ADHD for Smartass Women, and my purpose is always to show you who you are and then inspire you to be it. In the thousands of ADHD women that I have had the privilege of meeting, I've never met a one that was not truly brilliant at something, not one. So today we have a wonderful guest, so let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right in. I'm going to tell you a little story. So several months ago, our guest sent me an email where she shared her ADHD diagnoses. She also shared this little tidbit. This is what she said. I have always been the kind of person that watches a movie, a book, or a TV show 2 to 5 times or until I fully understand whatever it is that is in front of me. I am a jack of all trades. I love learning anything that I want to be educated on. I will study harder and longer than the student next to me and in front of me, but I cannot take tests. Fortunately for me, I got accepted into college because of my extracurricular activities. I have so many interests, and I am the most resilient individual you will ever meet. I graduated from Towson University with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with a concentration in entrepreneurship and a double minor in communications and metals, art, jewelry, if that is an ADHD. In my sophomore year of college, I almost didn't get into the business school because I couldn't pass the online computer test. I retook the class 4 times, and I'll never forget my father saying to me, "Jules, maybe the business school isn't for you." Sure enough, it took me 4 times to pass. This is a repeat situation in my life. I studied to get my real estate exam, and I couldn't fathom not passing. So I paid $150 12 times to pass that exam. I didn't care how much it cost. I owed it to myself to pass that exam. I read Dr. Hallowell's book. I'm assuming Jules is talking about ADHD 2.0. I read his book about a dozen times. I took your free program, 5 Days to Fall in Love with Your ADHD Brain, and I am now the proud owner of a 160-page ADHD user's manual that I've created. Oh my gosh, 160 pages. Just so you all know, this is a free program that I run a couple of times a year. We just did one last week, and our students walk away with a 1-page user's manual. So this is a total overachiever here. And there are a lot more examples that Juliana cited in this email, but we have to stop somewhere. So for all of these reasons, I am just delighted to introduce you to Juliana Hock. Juliana grew up in Baltimore County, Maryland. Entrepreneurship has always been a passion for her. She started her first business all the way back in elementary school. After college, Juliana earned her Maryland real estate agent license, and she is now a member of the Greater Baltimore Board of Real Estate. She currently balances work as a realtor with work as the director of admissions at a large skilled nursing facility. She is one of 37 cousins in her very large but close-knit family. She is an avid hiker and loves to spend her time exploring the East Coast's national parks, working out at the gym, and being with those she loves. Juliana's purpose is to motivate women to feel good in their own skin and to inspire ADHD women to live their best life today. Juliana, did I get all that right?
Yes.
I didn't miss anything, at least not yet, huh?
You did perfect.
So can I ask you, how old are you?
I'm 28.
28. Okay. And can you tell me that first business that you started back in elementary school, what was it?
I ran a restaurant with my cousins. It was a fake business, but I used real money. I was in charge of making sure all of my cousins were doing their job to make sure our fake restaurant customers were pleased. But my real first business was I made jewelry and I sold it at swim meets. I had to be in the 5th or the 6th grade.
So, can we start? I want to talk about a bunch of other things, certainly your resilience, but can we start by talking about your ADHD diagnoses first?
Sure. I was diagnosed at a young age. In the 3rd grade, my teachers called my mom in for student teacher conference with my mom. All 3 of my teachers were sitting at a desk, and my mom was sitting in front of them at another desk. And they said, "Look at the 4 pencils on the desk in front of you." They said, do you notice that none of those pencils have an eraser? And they said, your daughter has a learning problem. And my mom just said, what do you mean? Like, is something wrong with her? Is she going to be okay? Is my daughter healthy? And they just said, yeah, she's fine. She's just going to take a while to do her homework. So I was diagnosed at a young age. Nothing was really done about it until I took 5 days to fall in love with your ADHD brain, and I was diagnosed by a psychiatrist, and that's the moment that changed my life.
So I'm curious about the pencils. What did the pencils have to do with your, learning challenge or your ADHD?
So they were full-size pencils, and the eraser was completely gone. I just took a really long time to do my work. I guess that's perfectionism at a young age. I would just do the work, and then I guess I didn't like it, and I would erase it. And then I don't know. That's a good question. I just do a lot of erasing.
And so that's what they saw as a problem.
Yes.
So your tenacity started it started well before 3rd grade, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. So what were some of the symptoms that you noticed at that time as a child? Do you remember them?
Yes. I just couldn't understand school. But the interesting thing is I never wanted to miss school because I would be so nervous I would miss an exam and then I would fail the class or whatever it was. And at a young age, I remember looking at the girl's paper next to me because I just couldn't understand the material. My reading comprehension was terrible. At a young age, kids would call me I was fat. That was uncomfortable. I just had baby fat until like the 5th grade, and I got made fun of for that. So that definitely wasn't fun. Those are what I can remember off the top of my head.
So even though you struggled so much in school, did you enjoy school? Or because it sounds like you just love to learn.
Oh, yes. I loved school. Oh my gosh. I love talking to people. I love making people feel good. I love playing games and sports. I was never really amazing at sports, but I loved participating. any club, any group setting I was a part of. Very social, had very many friends in different groups. So I never really was part of one friend group, that I was part of so many small friend groups. And also, I swam competitively in the starting elementary school. So I always balance life, school, and swimming.
So you didn't struggle with social issues? You had a good group of friends and you felt like you
Oh no,
understood
I
social cues?
struggled.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I'm going to tell you, it doesn't make sense when I'm about to say what I'm about to say. I am the extreme introvert, but I'm also the extreme extrovert. As in, I get nervous to get to a crowd of people, but when I'm there, I will talk to every single person in the room. I will introduce myself. Yes, I will. I'm that person. But I get so, like, I love being by myself. I love it. And also, I overthink people's opinions of me. That's when I never really felt like I fit in growing up, because yeah, my mental part as a kid was definitely struggling. But my mom says she didn't know that. My mom says I didn't struggle, but I know deep down I did struggle.
So can I ask you, Juliana, you were really nervous to go, but then once you were there and you were chatting with everybody, did you love being there, or
Yes.
were you chatting because you were so uncomfortable?
Oh no, I'm so happy to be there. I learned now that I'm 28 that I used to compare myself to this standard that didn't even exist. So I would say, like, oh, you're not pretty enough, like, oh, like, this is a terrible outfit, or like I would just overthink my ability and like my self-worth. Fortunately, I no longer do that, and that's something I am really proud of.
As well, you should be. Just because we think it doesn't mean it's true, huh?
Yes, at 100%.
So, what happened? What changed with your mindset that you were finally able to realize that, nah, that's not true? Just because I think it's not true.
Self-perception and changing the dialogue, the internal dialogue that you have with yourself. And I owe that to cognitive behavioral therapy, which
Mm-hmm.
means you evaluate your emotions and your feelings, and like the whole formulation method of, this is how I feel now, and this is what a result, this is later as a result of that. So just really thinking about a situation before I react. And that's another thing with ADHD, is impulsivity, and also an over evaluation of feelings and RSD. And there's just a lot that goes into that.
So, when did you start cognitive behavioral therapy? How old were you?
28, and it was a result of taking 5 days to fall in love with your ADHD brain, that I felt comfortable enough to normalize therapy. And I was fighting therapy my whole life because I just didn't like how impersonal it was. Fighting it, fighting it, fighting it. And then working in healthcare during the pandemic, I waved my hands in the air and I said, I can't do this myself. I need help, and I'm not afraid to admit it. So I started therapy, and that's where cognitive behavioral therapy came in. It was something that was taught to me.
That is wonderful. So, what you're telling us is this is recent and it's made such a huge difference in how you feel about yourself, your self esteem. I'm sure your confidence, right?
Yes, it was my 28th birthday. It was my birthday gift to myself for my 28th birthday in April, to start therapy.
I can't imagine a better birthday gift.
I know, right?
Absolutely. So, okay, so let's back up a second. Maybe you said it and I wasn't, I'm ADHD. I didn't quite pay attention. So, when exactly were you diagnosed with ADHD?
was diagnosed when I was in the third grade, but
Oh, you told me
I
that.
was diagnosed. So I've known my whole life I've had ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Also, wait, I want to answer your question and then I want to say a comment. Then I was formally diagnosed combined type when I was 28. And that was after taking 5 days to fall in love with your ADHD brain. One of the sections the first day was to check all your symptoms. I'm pretty sure I checked off like 28 out of 30 boxes, and yep. I was like, I didn't even realize there could be a combined type. This is a lot to digest, and that's honestly, that is a lot of symptoms to manage. If there's 9 for each symptoms for each ADHD, and I have about 18 symptoms, wonderful. But I knew my whole life I have had ADHD because my father, who is undiagnosed, he 100% has ADHD, but he is hyperactive. And he basically can't sit still. And he's very impulsive, very aggressive, but very loving man. And I love him. He's one of my very best friends as well.
So, what has changed? I mean, I know, okay, you were diagnosed when you were 3, but it sounds like you did nothing with it. Nobody knew what to do with it. And in truth, usually what is done is you're just handed a prescription, right? And that is never enough. So, I'm curious, since you've been basically re-diagnosed and now you know it's combined type and it's only been a couple months, what has changed? Is there anything other than the fact that you finally realized, I need therapy, and you were introduced to cognitive behavioral therapy? Is there, what else has changed?
Freedom.
What do you mean by that?
I would absolutely say freedom. I'm just fortunate that I was able to recognize and acknowledge my symptoms. I think the hardest part is acknowledging your symptoms. Like, we all know our symptoms, but to say I have this and I need help working towards it, or this symptom is could possibly kill me. It's
What do you mean by freedom?
just being able to use my ADHD symptoms to my advantage and to clearly understand that there is nothing wrong with me. Nothing. Not one thing.
Yeah.
And I have ADHD and these are my symptoms. And being able to acknowledge these symptoms, I've been able to manage my ADHD so much better. And another good one is taking the right medication, therapy, doing what is needed to manage those symptoms, and to also understand that not one person is the same, which also means there is not one ADHDer that is the same. But I've really connected with a handful of people on your podcast, especially connecting with you, Tracy, where I see so much of myself in you guys that it's been really helpful. Also, the support of mentors that also have ADHD who I genuinely trust. And that's also just granting permission to allow yourself to try new things that could possibly benefit you.
That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder in the freedom too, and I think you kind of alluded to this, but the sense that, okay, we've got weaknesses. All we hear about are the weaknesses. But guess what? Because of those weaknesses, we also have these amazing opposing strengths like creativity, right? Because we're impulsive. Did that help you with this whole freedom idea as well?
100%. Mm-hmm.
Anything else that's changed?
Since my diagnosis, yes. How much time do we have? I'm just kidding. The next thing from my diagnosis is my food behavior. Started seeing a food behavior caseworker in April for binge eating. And never in my life would I ever say, could I say, oh my gosh, through managing my binges, I've allowed my brain to think about other things, and my brain is allowed to focus on other things and create other things, because I was so focused on food and exercising. And also, like, I was such an extreme endurance athlete, which I still am, but I would go just do some long distance runs, swim, whatever you name it, hikes. And it was like, I just never felt good enough. And then when I finally accepted, the more acceptance I had within myself, which doesn't happen overnight, but and also just loving yourself, but genuinely loving yourself. But so food therapy was like the best thing for me, because just over evaluation of your shape checking, over exercising, just having these standards in yourself. Criticism killed me. That's with RSD, just murdered me, just over, some people don't know what boundaries are, and they'd say something to me really hurtful. Learning, to go through those things has also changed. Another thing, since my diagnosis, I'm now on a 10 milligram anxiety medication. I'm not sure if I want to be on it long term, but that's another, I really feel like it's helping me, because working through healthcare and the pandemic really messed up my mind.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep at night thinking about everything.
So the medication that they put you on, is it Vyvanse, or what are you on for your?
Yes, it is Vyvanse, and I love it. When I was in college, on my last semester of college, my primary doctor, I said, hey, I have a hard time focusing in class. And she said, you have ADD. It's common. Gave me 10 milligram instant release Adderall twice a day. I was like, oh, great. Let me try this. Oh my gosh. Once you get the right medication, game changer. I feel so much more myself. I am so thrilled.
Well, and you had a doctor help you, right? You're not just
yes.
taking, medication that a friend's like, hey, here, try this. Because like you said, we're all so different. And I kind of figured it might be Vyvanse because you had talked about binge eating. And that's a common one that they prescribe for those of us who, overthink food.
Oh, and the other thing I did is reach out to our ADHD for Smartass Women Facebook group and asked about hormones and birth control. And I got a lot of great feedback. And it turns out I have PMDD, which I get very emotional 10 days before my menstrual. And I'm now starting a birth control that gives you the same dose of estrogen each day. And I'm so excited to try it. I think it will really help with mood. And also another great benefit to Vyvanse for me personally is my moods are so much better. And I'm so grateful for that.
Wow. So just so our PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And what we do talk about in 5 days is how hormones are directly related to our symptoms. And that week, during ovulation, the week before your period, is when your estrogen levels drop. And this is for neurotypical women, as well as, women with ADHD. But you can imagine if their estrogen is dipping, what is ours doing? We get like a double whammy. So I just wanted to make sure that our audience knows what PMDD is. So we often hear that those with ADHD, that we're just really resilient. And it makes sense. When you struggle over and over again, whether it's because of a learning challenge at school or social problems, ADHD, you either develop learned helplessness and you get so flattened by it all, or you develop grit. You are no longer afraid of failing because you've failed so many times that you start to learn that, hey, maybe failure is actually the best teacher I could ever have. But you, dear Juliana, are literally the poster child of resilience and grit. Where did you get this from? Where did it come from?
I just have to take a moment for myself because that's so. Thank you for the compliment. Um, it's so nice to be recognized for just how hard I worked throughout my life. Just I wanted to not finish college so bad because it was hard for me, so hard for me, and I actually said like I'd rather die than give up. I'd rather give up trying, die trying, and it's and I'll tell you where I learned it. Just some real, just having a good support group, and the want to be the drive of wanting to be the best version of yourself. That's where, for me, every single day I wake up and I say to myself, best day ever. My boyfriend wants to kill me every morning. Not really, but I just say, best day ever, best day ever. Let's go have the best day ever. And it's just having that mindset of like, let's just go have some fun. And, let's just make this some fun. And that's ADHD for you.
It's so interesting because when you really think about it, we shouldn't have this tenacity. We shouldn't have this drivenness because oftentimes, especially for someone like you who struggled so mightily in school, you're constantly getting the door slammed in your face. But for some reason, there's something about you and a lot of ADHDers that almost drives you harder. They are not going to let, they're not going to, get me down. They are not going to they're not going to slam that door in my face. I am going to figure out a workaround.
Yes. And my next response is self-discovery. Every time I'm done an assignment, anytime I'm done a race, anytime I'm done a conversation, even a Zoom call, with a client interaction, with family, I always take a moment to myself to say what went wrong, how can I do better. I take a note to write down what was said. I have little mental notes with myself. And I love hiking long distance. We just went to New Hampshire, my pop and my sister, we hiked up Mount Washington, and that's self-discovery, pushing yourself to limits a normal person wouldn't want to go to, but I thrive off of that because nothing about me is normal. So going outside the box is for sure where my heart lies.
Can I ask you, Juliana, this strategy that you have to pause before you're going to impulsively jump into something and to really consider, okay, what is it that I really want? And then after it's done, to debrief. That is, ADHD coaching 101. Our impulsivity causes us to just sort of run through things and just keep going, right? And never really taking the time to pause and consider, okay, do I really want to do this? Is it connected to my intention? But then once it's done, okay, what happened and how could we do it better? And you clearly do that. So my question for you is, did this come about because of cognitive behavioral therapy, or were you always like this?
It was neither. It was actually a result of identifying that I have RSD. The moment I understood how debilitating my RSD is and was,
Let's tell our listeners what we're talking about. So it's called rejection sensitive dysphoria, and it is obviously the sense of rejection that can be rejection. Since I'm trying to remember, there's a Greek word for dysphoria, which I guess means just so incredibly painful. Like it's physically painful for a lot of people who suffer from RSD. So I'm sorry, but I know people always say, well, you say these acronyms and we don't know what they are. I just assume everybody knows at this point, right?
Yes. But understanding that I have RSD and understanding it is debilitating for me, it will leave me hung up on the wall for hours and it will take all of my energy. And acknowledging I have this and I'm not afraid to say it because I've been able to move on with my life. But also to answer another your other question is I hate not knowing something. I just felt like when I was all growing up, I just felt like not stupid. My mom said that when I was growing up, everyone said how kind I was and how caring I was. So I had other strengths than being smart and being in the GP class, knowing all these languages. Uh, so I always felt like I was treated like I was stupid and an airhead. So I just hated not knowing something. So anything I know at this point in my life, I've taught myself. I will teach myself absolutely anything. I hate not knowing something, and I read books all the time, audiobooks. I'm always listening to something because it's like I feel like you can't advance yourself any more than listening or reading about experts who are expert on the topic.
So you're an autodidact. Do you think that that is the best way you learn is by teaching yourself?
Good question. I think that I don't know. I can't answer your question because that's all I know since I've graduated. Yes, I would say I can't answer your question because I've always just taught myself.
Mm. So it sounds like that probably is your best way of learning. That's your workaround.
Oh my gosh, I have to tell you something. I hope no one will tell anybody. I guess we are on air, but my loving boyfriend helped me take my real estate continuing education class, which, as you mentioned, I can't. I'm very terrible at taking exams. I always have, and I always will be. Even if I study more than anyone else in the class, I will still fail. Oh. Even if I do everything, I never partied in college. I never went out. I always sat in, and did my work. Anyways, my boyfriend read the questions to me. And then instead of reading out A, B, C of the answers, he said the answers in a different scenario. And I answered every single question correctly. So he basically reworded the confusing answers and I got every question right. So I do believe that I am audio.
So what you're saying is when you heard them, mm-hmm. you could answer the questions, but when you looked at them, that's when you struggled.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been tested for dyslexia?
No, but I think I would love to get tested for dyslexia considering, it is on the small scale.
Yeah.
On also speaking about audio, I wanted to share this with our listeners. I do audio journaling. I do audio recording, audio, read emails. I teach myself everything through saying it.
Through listening? Through listening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You need to go read up about dyslexia because I just want to tell you, having just gone through all of this with my son, we've been asking about dyslexia since he was a small child. And no. Look, he's too smart. He reads, it's heartbreaking to me. So I think it's 40%. I always get the statistic mixed up. So I'm just going to say that a high percentage of those of us with ADHD also have dyslexia and vice versa. So before I ask you the next question, I was asking you about how you've just learned how to pause and debrief. And you said you didn't learn that through cognitive behavioral therapy. Where did you learn that? When did you start doing that?
When I learned about RSD, because I just said to myself, I'm so annoyed at getting annoyed with certain people. And like, they don't even, like, these people don't think before they speak, but they're very loving and they're very sweet, and they just get me upset. So when I acknowledging like I have RSD and I know they're going to upset me and I know they don't mean what they're saying to me, but my gosh, like it's debilitating. So understanding going into a situation, like just to already say, I'm going to be calm. And that's when because I will, like I was mentioning, I will like get upset and I will fight for myself and I will stick up for myself. So now what I do is I set the boundary. These are my values through cartography. These are my values. This is what I stand for. And these values I have in front of me are not moving. So you can either like it and be my friend, or you can agree to disagree with me, because these are things about myself that are in place and are non-negotiable.
Oh my God, I love it. You've set boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I want to tell you a quick story. You may have heard of it. You may have heard of this gentleman before, but Malcolm Gladwell, I love Malcolm Gladwell. He's written a bunch of books. I think one of my favorites is Outliers, but he also wrote a book called,
Yes.
Yeah, you know it, right? Mm-hmm. He wrote a book called David and Goliath, where he explored the role of adversity in shaping our lives. And this ties right back into dyslexia. So one of his chapters is about dyslexia. And as I had mentioned, a huge percentage of dyslexic are also ADHD. And so in this book, he tells the story of Brian Grazer, who struggled so much in school. He would get F's and D's, and if he was lucky, he'd get, maybe one C or two. And so what he learned how to do, he reminds me of you. He learned how to plan and strategize before every test. Even in elementary school, he started this. And then what he would do is he would challenge every single one of his grades. And I think he started doing that in high school, and that's how he got through college. And he got so good at it because he would just wear the professors down. And so
I did the same thing.
You did?
Oh my gosh, yes.
I figured that. So by the way, Brian Grazer, for the past 30 years, he's been one of the most successful movie producers in Hollywood. And he doesn't know, because of what happened in, elementary school, high school, and college, he doesn't know how to take no for an answer.
I feel the same way.
So, okay. I figured you would. And my son was also home for the second half of the summer, and he was bored. So like you, he decided to study for a New York State real estate license. And I told him about you. And I told him about how many times you had to take this test.
No, don't say that.
Listen to what he said. He's like, do you think she's going to make a very good realtor? And I'm like, are you nuts? This woman doesn't give up. Kidding? She doesn't take no for an answer. She is such a hard worker. She's going to kill it. I would hire her in a heartbeat. So I want to know, what about you and your ADHD makes you so good at what you do? Because I can tell you're good. I can tell your heart. I can tell your tenacity. I can just tell that you just don't give up ever.
Compassion.
Talk to me about that.
Being passionate. And I told my sister yesterday on my way to work, I'm so grateful for having feelings. And I am so grateful for having wants, needs, and desires, because I have feelings and I love, like trying new things and being creative and seeing what sets my heart on fire. And I love discovery. But what makes me so successful with especially sales and people and delivering, what I promise, is passion. I am so stinking passionate about answering questions and finding people's needs. And I will not give up until the job is done. One of my cartography superpowers is, quote unquote, get the job done. And when I asked 6 people for cartography, if they could describe me, and actually 3 of them said I get the job done in their own way.
So because of your experiences in childhood and young adulthood, and your tenacity, do you feel like there is nothing that you cannot figure out and do?
100%. And I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong, and I'm not afraid to admit that I need help, and I'm not afraid to admit I'm struggling. And as soon as you ask someone for help, they're actually so excited you ask them, and it helps both parties, because then I get something off my to-do list, and then they're extra grateful because they're helping me with something that like they're good at. Because you only ask an expert if you don't know something. So just going right to the source.
So you've gotten really good at you have no qualms about asking people for help.
Not at all.
And I want you to think about this. So if you had all A's in high school and all A's in college, and you were the valedictorian and everything came so easy, do you think you would be as forthright in going out there asking for help and not giving up and just always figuring out a way to get things done?
Yes, because I believe in myself, and second guessing myself and saying I can't do something is not in my vocabulary.
But think about it. Don't you think that you've learned all of that from the adversity versus if things always came super easy to you and all of a sudden they didn't? And I think this is what happens to kids who do really well in school. I mean, I have several friends who top of their class all the way through, and then they got out into the real world and they really struggled because the real world is very different than the classroom.
Absolutely.
So what do you think the key to living successfully with ADHD is?
Answer every phone call with a verb. Wake up every morning with a smile on your face. Any job, responsibility, any priority you don't want to do, make it fun. You owe that to yourself, is to have a good life and to laugh. So to live successfully is to go into every situation positively and to prioritize your self-care. And self-care for me, is going to therapy, practicing mindfulness, going to the grocery store, eating every 4 hours, drinking water, getting 8 hours of sleep. Like, that is self-care for me. And it was hard for me to understand that I just need my basic human needs met to be happy.
Yeah.
Because, with ADHD, like, a lot of times you don't want to do something just because you don't want to do it, and you don't really need an explanation. It just, if you don't want to, you're not going to. But you never know what's going to happen.
Okay, so you have to explain to me, answering every phone call with a verb, what's that? What does that even mean?
Oh my gosh, be excited, Don't just answer that phone call with a smile, and that phone call will be
not with
so
a
much better.
verb, with verve.
Yeah, like with a smile, answer it with a smile.
Okay. And so that kind of plays into the whole positive emotion and have fun.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. What's your number one ADHD workaround?
I would say cognitive behavioral therapy.
That's a good one. Really good one. So, Juliana, where can people find you if they want to connect with you? Can they connect with you?
Thank you for asking me, Tracy. And yes, I 100% can. And that's why I agreed to be on this podcast with you, so that I can help younger women with ADHD or any other ADHDer that wants help with like going on a fitness plan, just in a fun ADHD way that just is right for you, to move ways that I don't just want to, anything I can help you guys with. So I actually just created an Instagram just for this podcast because I hate social media. I actually hate social, like I can't describe how much I dislike social media.
Me too.
So I hate it. But I know that, in 2021, the main social media platform that I'm most comfortable is probably Instagram. So I created an account. It's Juliana.evolve. So that is Juliana period EVOLVES, Juliana period evolves. And I'm going to start this page to just help other ADHDers feel good. And I would love to maybe make this Instagram account, my ADHD manual to I've actually wrote articles in my, I'm probably up to 200 pages in my manual now.
Of course you are.
I know. And it's front and back. I don't play around, Tracy. Anyway, so I would like to create an Instagram just to help about my ADHD and either helping about body positivity or ADHD workarounds. I haven't decided, but by the time this podcast airs, I'll have it up and going. And also my email is Juliana, M as in Mary, Hock. So JULIANA, M as in Mary, HOCK@gmail.com. I would
Wonderful.
love to hear from any listener. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Juliana, thank you so much for spending time with us here today. I so appreciate you. And I just love that in this short period of time, you have literally completely changed your life. I love it.
Well, it's really thanks to you for providing the course and the resources. And thank you to myself for, wanting to be the best version of me, to put those means into measure. And it's, I'm grateful that I have, the determination and resilience. Resilience is, never.
You certainly have that, up. Juliana.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's what I have for you for this week. If you like this episode with Juliana, please let us know by leaving a review. Our goal is to change the conversation around ADHD, helping as many women as we possibly can learn how their ADHD brains work so that they too may discover their amazing strengths. And you know what? Your reviews really do help in that regard. As always, you're listening to ADHD for Smartass Women. Come join me for free over at tracyotsuka.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you here next week. You've been listening to the ADHD for Smartass Women podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Otsuka, and we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Not coincidentally, ADHD for Smartass Women, it's also the name of our free Facebook group. We're a totally smartass community of successful, ambitious women who share our ADHD wins, questions, and workarounds. Join us at tracyotsuka.com, where you can also find more information on our Your ADHD Brain is A-OK system. I spy a happier life for us, and I'll see you again next week.